I just got to so it's that real. So I can't think of anything. I'm not right. Yeah. Because that's something. Then it's something swings down there. So. I have the power.
You jumped out, you can't.
Just throwing it out.
I'm late. Sitting yourself in house. We'll start with that. We'll start with that first. We'll start with that. I was wrong. I'm here, please. Right.
This meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Law. Notice of this meeting was sent to the Cape May Star and Wayne and the Atlantic City Press, posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, and has remained continuously posted as required under the notice under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice is and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. Everybody please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States. Republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Jim Barnes,
Present.
George Dick,
Here.
John Fusco,
Here.
Allison Morgan, Paul Mulligan,
Here.
Kevin O'Neill,
Here.
Tom Richard,
Here.
Lisa Rosselli is absent, Carol Sabo, here, Ryan Griffin,
Here.
Carol Ray Flynn is absent.
There is no new business as this is a work session agenda. So the first item would be the minutes of April 15th, 2025, work session minutes. If everybody has a chance to read those, please comment and or make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. I'll second.
Barnes,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Fusco,
Yes.
Morgan, Mulligan,
Yes.
O'Neill, Richards,
Abstain.
Sabo,
Yes.
Griffin,
Yes.
And the second item would be the minutes of May 6th, 2025, the meeting minutes. If everybody has had a chance to review them, please comment and or make a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the May 6th minutes. Second.
Barnes,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Fusco,
Abstain?
Morgan, Mulligan,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Richards,
Yes.
Sabo,
Yes.
Griffin,
Abstain.
The resolutions this month, the resolution we have on the agenda is number 08-25, 101 Sunset Boulevard LLC, 101 Sunset Boulevard, Block 34, Lot 5. And if everybody had a chance to review the resolution and or comment or make a motion to approve. I would make a motion to approve that.
Second.
Barnes,
Yes.
Dick,
Yes.
Fusco,
Abstain.
Morgan, Mulligan,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Abstain.
Richards,
Yes.
Sabo,
Yes.
Griffin,
Abstain.
There are no applications in this work session. So the next item would be the discussion, the master plan reexamination, and update with Matt Wanamaker of Pannoni Associations. And if you'd like to provide your report. Oh, just hit the on button.
Good. All right, thanks again, everybody. Good to see you again. I just wanted to give an update on where we are with the master plan reexamination. I drafted it into hand here. We completed this draft in May and we're currently working through some revisions, just looking at, to start with typos and things we might have misheard. So that's the first step. As we go through that, we're gonna evaluate some of the new recommendations we've made. But first, I just do want to recap what the sections of the re-exam are that we have completed. So as per state statute, there are a number of things we need to do to make sure that you are in line with the state requirements for your keeping your master plan valid. The first being that we address the requirements for major problems and objectives relating to land development in the borough at the time of the adoption of the last re-exam report. So we have a section in this draft that goes through each of the things you had in the last re-exam and evaluates whether or not those objectives were either removed in the next round, addressed, or still need to be addressed. And where they still need to be addressed, we've made some preliminary recommendations for how that might happen or what progress has been made towards that. Next is the extent to which those problems have been reduced or increased. Talk about, we kind of mix those together. The next, the extent where there have been significant changes in the assumptions and policies, things like county goals, et cetera. So we have pushed that a little bit farther back in the document because of the flow. They don't tell you how to do it, so put it that way. The flow of how we wanted to do things. But before that, are our recommendations to you, the planning board, as to some new things that we think you should be looking at new objectives, policies, and standards, and whether a new plan itself should be prepared to make this a little bit more comprehensive.
Matt, we had a problem last meeting. Could you lower your mic and just speak it a little bit?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Was it raised because of the last meeting? So, yeah, so just where I was there, the next section, where we have our new recommended changes. So we'll discuss that a little bit more in depth after I go through this list. Next, we have the recommendations of the planning board regarding the incorporation of redevelopment plans. So we may need some feedback for you if there are any in the works. Does anyone have anything off the top of your head? Yes, no? Nothing. Okay. So we'll check that off our list. And then finally, the recommendations concerning the locations appropriate for the development of public electric vehicle infrastructure. That's the last section.
That's a state statute that has to be.
Yes, it is. That's the newest one. So what we did was we got all this together in one draft for your review. The most, I guess, the feedback I'd expect with this is, yes, we addressed that, but we also did this, things like that. I've also, pointed out that I got all your names wrong, the acknowledgement page. So things like that, we're going to work out those kinks in the next few days. But the big part that I wanted to discuss with you today was that one section I talked about with new recommendations. So to back up, we held a survey from March 14th to April 18th. We received 164 responses from around the borough. And we had asked people questions on topics such as environmental issues, placemaking, economic development, housing, transportation, and mobility. So we will summarize everything we've heard in that report in the appendix of this document. From that, the top 3 issues we identified environmentally, 126 of 164 responses were related to overdevelopment, flooding, and stormwater management. Does that sound consistent with what you've been facing?
Yes.
So far? It seemed that area residents prioritized improvements to walking and biking safety. That was a full 94 responses. And the second most important issue there was streetscape beautification and increased outdoor gathering and recreation spaces. So we are at a little bit of a crossroads here, whether we want to do what a full master plan would do and address all of these and come up with fully fleshed out recommendations, or we can leave it here to recommend a full replacement and make some preliminary recommendations of things you can address in the next couple months with some suggestions of how that might go about being done. So, what do you think, Aaron?
The second one.
Second one.
Just, that.
Preliminary.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what this draft shows, at least for a few issues. I'm going to continue to work with your engineer on a few others that have been brought to my attention, but that list includes, which we've got here, the New Jersey DEP has new resilient environment and landscapes regulations, which not sure if they have been adopted yet. I'm going to follow up on that, but we're going to recommend that should be addressed as a goal.
Resilient and
Resilient environments and landscapes. REAL is the acronym.
Can I ask you a question? May I ask you a question? It's fine. Where it says environmental concerns, and then the second one listed, the first one is development of remaining open space. And then the next one is overdevelopment. And I'm trying to figure out, I think if I took a survey, the thing that I hear most is people are concerned about density, that the places that exist are being overdeveloped in terms of lots, individual lots of being, houses are too big, too many people in them, being designed for large amounts of rentals, that kind of stuff. And I'm trying to figure out from the survey result where that lives, and I'm wondering if that is what people, even though it says environmental, that overdevelopment is being number two.
I would group that as overdevelopment, an environmental as well as an economic concern and a housing concern. But just the way the survey was structured, it seemed to fall best under environmental concern.
And, it just seems to me that, there's a number of folks who feel like any development is overdevelopment, so, whether it's infill or, and I think that's a distinction we've tried to make is, infill, like in the R1, is the desired location for development, although sometimes at that location, that's where it can be overdeveloped, because of the space constraints. So it's a small municipality and we don't have a lot of real estate to work with. That's why it feels so imperative to be, cognizant of what we're doing in each space.
And the way we dealt with that here in the draft is we use the word contextual, so we encourage contextual development. So rather than say, we think you should change the FAR from this number to this number, or change the bulk standard to this and this, we're recommending that you have that debate next and determine what you think is best for contextual development to fit with what the neighborhood is now, to prevent something being built that may not be appropriate.
Would you be able to make any suggestions?
From what I've been hearing tonight, it sounds like you'd like us to go down that road, and I'm willing to do that.
That's pretty important.
Yep. I don't want to tell you what, you should do this with this number, but I'm going to give you some guidelines, which I think you should follow.
We definitely have oversized properties fitting the neighborhoods of Westgate and Ivy, and we're trying to address that now.
Yeah, I think when we talk about those bulk requirements, et cetera, what's allowable, and when it's actually done, so we kind of need a touchstone of what would be a good number, because we have an idea of what we're looking at and size and scale that doesn't feel right when you're walking down the street or
Yep.
standing next to it or living next to it.
For example, the porch aspect,
Right.
we encourage porches, and then we offer a plus for the actual structure of the building, which may actually, reduce what we're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
The scale of the building
Yeah.
is so large compared to the.
It was a good idea on.
Yeah,
I was going to mention that, in addition to suggesting guidelines for you, what we'll probably do is suggest some character guidelines too. Not telling people, you can't have a modern house, you have to have this design, you have to use this color materials, but really giving the incentives for the things that encourage contextual development, both from a bulk standpoint and also a character and historical usage standpoint.
We spent a lot of time discussing design elements and how we could get that into the bulk requirements. But we would welcome any suggestion you had and how other people have done.
Okay.
Experience.
I think, Margate, comes to mind as a city that I know struggled with that, Margate, Longport, in terms of trying to avoid big boxes. So some of that is, they'll have staggered setbacks, the first floor is a certain setback, the second floor is a different setback. And then they have architectural requirements for certain walls, you can't have a wall that's so long without some break in it, some architectural feature. I mean, I know that they have that kind of stuff. I don't claim to be an expert, I'm not an expert planner, but I've run into that in my practice, and maybe Anthony has as well.
Is that an internal design? When you talk about the walls?
They'll have, which one, the one of the staggering and the one about the design features?
The second one,
I've seen ordinances where they say per 30 linear feet, you have to have some kind of feature, you have to have a dormer or a window. I don't know, has anybody else heard of this?
Wildwood Crest does it.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that might be something we want to.
Instead of just a big slice of cake.
yeah, I got it. Got it.
Okay. So really what we did was we broke the recommendations into two categories. One were, what we heard from the survey, which we're going to recommend be looked at through the master plan. And what I'm doing tonight is I'm going to make some preliminary recommendations for some things you can kind of chew on and discuss as a group. And the second were the land use ordinance amendments, which we're being more specific about. And that involves the New Jersey resilient environments and also the housing recommendations. So started moving along with some recommendations for housing when it comes to short-term rentals, which is another top issue that came up in the survey. And just wanted to note that several towns in the state have started to outright ban them. Others are looking at 30 consecutive days being a minimum, which was my preliminary recommendation of something you might want to look at. But that's going to require an ordinance change to regulate that.
So, Matt, the 30 consecutive days, are they by one renter?
Yes.
Mayor, we had a meeting today, Matt, myself, and attorney in my firm, David, who was looking into this for me and with me. And we went through, we talked about that 30-day, and it described how on shore communities, 7 days is sort of a accepted, like the time immemorial, and that less than 7 is where everybody starts to get a little troubled. And there are, so what I have here is I have a memo and a packet with ordinances from about 7 or 8 different municipalities that I'm gonna give to Trish when I leave, and maybe she can scan and send it to everybody. And what you find is this: my original thinking was that you would regulate it through zoning, in that you would define residential use to not include certain short-term, very short-term rentals, less than 7 days, so that it wouldn't, that it's more like commercial. So you just take that out of your residential use and make the 4, 3, 4, and 5 day things not a residential use. That doesn't seem to be what municipalities are doing. They're doing it through the police power, which is more like mercantile license, defining short-term rental, sometimes 30, sometimes 70, 7 to 30, but less than 7, that kind of stuff. So they allow no less than 7, then between 7 and 30, they regulate. And then they have a whole pile of regulations, and everybody does it kind of different. Now, Upper Township had the one that I think looks most like what I'd like to see personally, but they didn't pass theirs, and I'm trying to figure out why, if they figured out it was legal or what, but they pretty much banned less than 7. Now, when we were talking today, I said you might get some local flavor about that here, in that, and I'm just speaking my own experience, I spent a lot of time, blessed keep my kidney. There's certain 3 days that everyone knows are 3-day rentals. President's Day weekend, Labor Day, Memorial Day. Those 3-day weekends, I think people are kind of like, okay, that's a long weekend, that's what people rent for, that makes sense. So maybe you have an ordinance that permits, and I said also the Christmas break weekend.
Yes.
I mean, we're a good, the local debate was the Christmas break. And then other than that, maybe you don't want to allow those rentals that are less than 7 days, and that would be your ordinance. And then in this packet, you'll see some people sort of touch on parking, not as clearly as we would like. But in those regulations where you can kind of address the parking thing, like you're not allowed to advertise for more than the spaces you have, or something along those lines, whatever you guys want to do. There's a whole bunch of really neat regulations. to my surprise, I didn't know this gateway actually has a short-term rental ordinance, but it's not very strong. It just makes you register. It doesn't really set number of days and stuff like that. So I'm gonna have this packet reproduced so everyone can read what's going on in other communities. And then after you guys do that, and then you have, everyone's read them and has some discussion about it, what I can do is, I have some, I have a summer intern who's, I've got a discussion before, he's very smart. And what I intend to do at a lower rate, because I can do it cheaper, is after I get your comments, I can have him reconcile all these ordinances. And in your comments and see what kind of ordinance he can come up with, reconciling all these based on your comments and things that concern you. And then maybe we'll have something that we can look at, the next couple of meetings or so. That's the plan.
Was there anywhere the ordinances have limit the number of people?
Yes.
that-
Yes.
that allow them-
Per bedroom, yes. I saw one that had it per bedroom, I think Seaside Heights. Yeah, the number of people per
So
bedroom.
I actually think that one's important, because I think people stuffing 20 people into a house that has 4 bedrooms is not really.
I just read through all these this afternoon and I did see that. So I'll leave this with Trish and then maybe she can scan it and give everybody a copy. If you want me, I'll take it on the scan. Mind it. At home, to my office. You mind scanning this for everyone? Second, Deborah?
Fine.
All right, so,
Hey, Rich,
yeah,
does,
this week.
does it speak to how it's enforced?
Yes.
Yeah.
A couple of them have enforcement, but it's like a whole separate
I don't know how
legal
you
process.
sit or.
Right.
It's like a $2,000 fine gets your attention. Somebody said, I saw a $2,000 fine. That may not have been your first violation, but your second and third, that's the real numbers.
Would that be for the renter or the person who owns the property?
The license that. So,
I think it should be for both.
And after the third offense, you can get them into your license.
you guys will pass the ordinance. Well, and remember, the police power ordinance is not passed by this board. The police power ordinance is passed by the governing body, so, but that's okay. What we talked about in our meeting was a two-pronged approach, kind of like a belt and suspenders, where we do the zoning one as well. That makes it not, that as a resident, not a residential use, have an approach to the residential use definition, and have the police power in some way that the two are reconciled, so that one is okay and one's not, we still have one, and kind of do it that way, and then you can do it by zone, and, think about it, so. Upper Township did kind of do it by zone. They allowed, smaller lots, couldn't have 3As, but big lots
But
could.
they didn't pass it.
They didn't pass it, and I asked Tony Monzo about that, and he said he thought Mark Caravan found something that made them concerned they couldn't do it, but as we know, Mark Caravan passed away. Ironically, the summer intern is gonna work on this, it's Mark Caravan's nephew, so maybe he can raise it. But anyway, that's the,
Is this something that you think if we started off with like a second day, is it possible at some point, let's say maybe 2 years from now, it'd be easy to kind of go back, revisit, and if we felt we needed to up it to 30 days, can that be done easily, or is this something like we have to get it locked down correct?
well, when you say easily, right? Easily is, there's technical easily and political easily, that's done by the governing body, so you do a reading, and then you do a second reading, and then you pass it, so ordinances can be changed very easily. But people have to conduct their business according to the statutes, right? So people are making business decisions, buying businesses, renting them out weekly, so it can be done easily mechanically, but whether it's an easy thing to do or whether it should be changed frequently is something that has to be decided as a matter of policy, right? Because if you bought a place expecting to rent it out, and all of a sudden you can only do full month rentals in July. Now, some of these, you'll see, Seaside Heights, are very calendar based, right? So, 30-day rentals are required from October 1st to May 1st. And then from May to October, it goes down to 7 days. Face the reality of how things work, so,
Is there anywhere, and Matt, this might be a question for you, but the kind of, consequences isn't the right word, but how, once these have gone into place, like, is there a follow-up report to say, like, yes, this worked, yes, this or no, this didn't work, or we wish we did it differently? Is there anything written by any other city or town that would help us to kind of make that decision?
Usually if I start working in a new town, we will ask to see a copy of all the resolutions or the board meetings to see what has come up to you guys repeatedly,
Okay.
to be able to gauge that. But as Solicitor had mentioned, the technical part of that is pretty easy. Once you have it written in there, then the only part you have to really change is that number. So you're kind of halfway there. So if you see that you're getting people come back to you and say, this number doesn't really work for us, there's a paper trail to document that, then maybe that's when we move the needle a little bit to change the number.
And as part of our review, I can have my office, try to reach out to maybe the solicitor to the towns and it's just call us and what's your experience with this and see what they have to say. I would include that in their analysis.
Yeah, that might not have been the number they laid about first.
It's been a disaster, it's been awesome, or you've been sued 3 times, and I would be curious to hear what they said, so. Yeah, that's part of what we need to do.
Is it possible to put a cap on the number of permit licenses that you issue to anybody who's in the? Now,
I did see, but I think Upper Township tried to do it too, like, from my.
and now would they have a lottery for it, or is your grandfather needed to have one, and then there's a limit, say there's 120, their grandfather, and once they go down to 100, that's hard to say.
I honestly don't know how to do it.
Can't really know.
Right.
But
It's like to put Ryan on the spot as a realtor, what does this sound like to your experience?
So I think that there are some bigger houses that get booked up, but over the last years since the COVID fund dwindled down, bigger homes aren't really being rented quite as consistently as they once were. I think the bigger issue that we have, the lack of year-round housing, and not so much the short-term rentals. I mean, you should probably speak to that more so than an individual. But I think that you're also, in certain areas, it makes sense because you're contributing to the vibrancy of the commercial district that we're working to protect. If you take that away, store to me, there's somebody down for a long weekend right now. They're gonna go to West Side, they're gonna go to Bella Vita, they're maybe make their way up to Dock Lakes, who knows, but they're on foot walking around. So it could be negatively impacting some of the commercial district. But I'll tell you, I have seen it slow down considerably in West Cape May. Cape May still does well because everything's close, except for when you're in, say, Village Green area where you're spread out, it's a mile from everything at best.
So if I could play devil's advocate there, obviously our intent with the re-exam is to do something that happens every 10 years and everything's cyclical. So that sounds more like a downturn in the economy than what we're trying to plan for. So, we're trying to plan for a big chunk, and this master plan says 2005, 2015 says problem with development. So how are we, we really have to look at the 10-year plan, not just, a bi-yearly type of scenario with the COVID and things like that. I think we're on the right track with the limiting of
Brian, can I?
working.
You're talking about the number of big house rentals has gone down, watching renting. How big houses, I mean, you sell houses.
It's not so much that the larger house rentals are going down, because they're all booked for the summer, almost all of them are booked.
Are you just saying that it would be if?
The off-season.
Yeah.
Off-season.
But I think one of the issues that you might also be able to help with is, I mean, how many houses are being built now that aren't going to be rented? I know you just sold one on Fifth, but that seems to be, that's the exception. What's that? Right, but that's the exception. It seems to me that most of the houses that are built now are for Airbnb, rentals, whatever. It's not for living.
And I think it's transitioning because the price points for new construction standard are where they are, and it's or investment. It's rent every year. At that price point was say 25% down. So it's starting to work backwards, and we're starting to see more people that are using it for themselves, or they might say, hey, look, we're gonna rent half of the season and use it half of the season. So there definitely is a transition going on right now in the properties that I'm personally selling.
Almost all of them sound like this. This is Upper Township. All right, I turned it off, it's sniffing. The Township Committee finds and declares that the short-term rental of certain residential dwelling units within the township benefits the local community by affording owners of such units the ability to garner additional income from their real property in order to diminish the financial burden and carrying costs and maintenance expenses related to the property, as well as providing travelers with an alternate option for accommodations in the township. Notwithstanding those benefits, the Township Committee also finds and declares that certain transitory uses of residential property tend to affect the residential character of the community, and if unregulated, can be injurious to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So they're all doing that balance of trying to, rentals. I mean, Cape May has preserved a lot of historic houses with rentals, right? People have dumped a lot of money to preserve houses for another 200 years, and a lot of the businesses rely on these people visiting. But on the other hand, the neighbors who live there are annoyed, so you're balancing that. So maybe that once you look at this, that's what your regulations do. Some zones is better than others. Sometimes a year is less offensive than others, and that's what you guys will do in your policy meeting. It's not much.
Or have you come across, which, either of you, have you come across the mercantile licenses, someone, let's say there's like infinite number of mercantile licenses, if you're renting to year-round renter versus a limited percentage if you're doing short-term rental, if you kind of have to register it some.
I don't know, and I just want to give a little caveat for that. I'm a zoning attorney, right? So my experience with zoning and planning, but all of these are going through the police power. So Frank Corrado and, Chris Killingsworth, those guys, they have much better and clearer answers on this than I do. I don't move in that world really. I'm reading these orders. I expect to find a bunch of zoning stuff, and what I found was a bunch of police power stuff.
But we're still saying we should
We
do
can
both.
Yeah, I would just love to see someone else run.
You're right, because when you talk about your rental season too, the rental season has shifted to through December, where, between birding and the parade and all the other attractions on an off summer season. But that's when you get those 3 or 4 day people, where you see more people with kids that aren't in school coming, in September, October, when it's prime time to be down here. So that whole thing shifted. Anyway, speaking of that.
So related to this, but a little bit different, and I apologize if we've had these statistics before, but I don't recall them. Are we seeing a higher rate of just true secondary homes in West Cape May, where the homes are largely vacant for long periods of time? That's different. They're not ready to Ryan's point. A lot of people are just buying now and holding and using it, but they're never actually here. That doesn't feel like a community, right? So I don't know if we have any statistics on this.
I don't think we have.
Well,
Just,
I had to do a study to that effect 5 years ago for emergency management, and yes, we have 50, you could say 50% of all the rooftops are not occupied, and certainly over the winter, that number extends almost county-wide, makes Cape May County unique in that standpoint that you're not gonna see that anywhere else. It's second homes and it's homes that are used in rental, but they don't. The financial upside to the municipalities is the property pays taxes. The property doesn't consume government services for the most part. No school, none of those vacation homes put children in the school system. So we enjoy lower taxes here than Union County, Middlesex County, Mercer County. Because of that,
Yeah, I get that, but
That's,
it's also it's also disconcerting too if you're on a block and half the homes are empty and not being. It's a balancing act, kind of to what Rich was saying. We're trying to thread the needle here to make sure that we have a community that's vibrant at the same time.
well, probably one of the things that, to really have on somebody's radar is, what if that whole scenario flipped? You would not remotely have enough school capacity. Because if you filled every house with families that are now vacant.
Yeah, but I don't think we're anywhere near. I think it's going the other way.
Between.
this would work, but we don't need a choice.
We give them a choice program. I think the bigger question for me is, and it comes across in some of the things that are said in the survey, but it's what do we want our town to be? That's what we're doing here. Longer term, do we want it to be a residential community with people living here all year round? Do we want it to be a residential community with people living here all year round and some second homes? Or do we want to have what's happening now? More and more people are renting their house out full time, and I think they are commercial, not residential. That's why that up as an issue. So what do we want? Do we want this to be a community of residents? I know in my little neighborhood, most of the people live there. It's great. It's the reason I moved to that spot in West Cape May. And we lived in Cape May, and it's desolate. So what of those categories do you want? I mean, as somebody who lives here year round and I don't go to Florida, I am here. I want to see people walking down the street. I'm not poor people. I want to see a vibrant community. Same thing with the school. I like watching little kids go to school. It's part of the fabric of living in this town. So what do we really want? And then work backwards and say, if we really want to live in short-term rentals, let's live in short-term rentals. We're just saying there's ways to do it. And then obviously the issue of housing density is all tied in.
I think there's, it might still be two separate issues, or I don't even know if it's an issue that we have, because to get a predominant year-round resident community here, I think there's a whole infrastructure of business and jobs, it's like way above this one, way above it. It's like, doesn't matter what we do, what ordinance we pass, if there's no way for young families or people to make money to live here, and you've got a good way, you don't just work, tourism or fisheries or something like that, then it's not gonna help the cause. So I just think that's a little bit pie in the sky, where I think talking about the short-term rentals and food things are coming in, and I think that's more like an immediate problem, and it's, 20 cars around renting houses and easier to rent water and then all these other things that are going on. I agree with you, but I just think that's a bigger thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be a mix, but it's where do we want to try and tilt what happens? I mean, we have people sitting at this table just moved here with getting shade. So what's the decision making process? A lot of people now who can work at home. And so there are opportunities. I think the problem actually is the affordability of the houses. It's not just about anybody. It's extremely expensive. So if you're limiting the houses that are developed to smaller houses and ones that can't be rented out for $6,000, $8,000 a week, it's going to be cheaper. The value of the house is going to be less, which makes it more affordable for more people. That's why how you change your ordinances. It may take a little bit of time to get to that point, but that's how I would look at it. It's financial incentive.
This is exactly the kind of debate I think you should be having about all these things. This is great. The way I left it in here, as we just left it, is we recommend that the borough investigate options or similar to neighboring communities ordinance changes to regulate the short term. So I think that interim step may be a good move for now. And then some of the other larger issues about affordability and those we can address in other sections. So that'll be my recommendation.
And when we talk about affordability, there's the affordability as dictated by the Constitution of the state of New Jersey, which that's not what I'm speaking about.
Yeah.
The average wager.
You're talking lowercase a affordable, not capital.
It's not,
Right.
you know,
And,
something.
and that lowercase, it can be addressed with some of the vocal parts.
Right.
So you're, yeah. So we can get to that in other sections. All right. Okay, so those are the major issues that we got from the survey and also from your feedback that we think that there should be land use ordinance amendments to address. Those 164 responses, I just should mop this up real quick, also raised issues, 103 responses that a priority was preserving agricultural activities on farms. So we're gonna make a recommendation there that that be something in a new land use plan element at least, but again, as per our conversations earlier tonight, we'll make some suggestions as to how you address that. In addition, we also heard a little bit on bike ped safety, which is somewhat limited by the roads that are county roads. But from my understanding, the county and the borough have been in discussions about these things, so we're just gonna mention that in the review of the previous re-exam report. And finally, historic preservation is something that came up as well, so I can make add a little paragraph about how we might want to move forward with that. Perhaps a new historic preservation plan element. We'll see how you think about that.
Can you elaborate on that? Like you said, it came up, you had numbers 164, 126, 103. Was it like 5 people or was it 100 people?
That number, if I can find it, is 72.
Great.
Were you one?
No?
Wait.
Yeah, that's both the tear downs of smaller homes and also the historic properties.
I have a couple questions. So one of the things that I'm really interested with all this is kind of like comparisons with other work that you've done, to be honest. So one of the things I was wondering, you might have to follow up on these because they're maybe complicated questions. You said 164 versus the population, someone. Remind me. Sorry?
927, but it's not the population. It's business owners, it's
Right.
people that use it. We didn't limit it to anything else.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm just curious about that percentage response, even though it's not necessarily a numerator denominator, how does that compare with other places? Okay. And then I guess similarly, I'm kind of something that, what Jim was just asking about some of these numbers that you shared, like, 72 of 164 and 103 of 164. I'm also curious how those responses are similar or different to other places.
Who prioritizes what?
Correct. So, I mean, like, I think I think I hear sort of consistently, I think there's some things about West Cape May that are different than other places. I think that agriculture, we're hearing some of these questions, I mean, the green space, et cetera, I mean, that's maybe different than what I would expect in some other shore channel that is more like, rocks and houses together. So I guess what I would love to know is like, if you have any way to possibly say to us, I don't know words in your mouth, but like, this community, based on the responses that we saw, indexes far more towards these types of things than we see in other shore communities or in other communities. I don't know if
That will take some extra research, but I will say off the top of my head, the issue of tear downs, it is everywhere. Whether that's an established community and they're having problems with it, tearing down historic homes, or whether it's a newer one, they're having a problem with tear downs that's changing the affordability and the density of the character. That's been number one almost everywhere lately.
Okay.
Bicycle and pedestrian is high, more places than I saw here. But the rest I'll have to see how it can.
Well, I don't think, having taken a few grad school statistics classes, I don't think this question here would stand up to any valid research.
Its main purpose was to
If
help
it's
us understand
informative.
a little bit more,
Yeah.
what we might be missing, which isn't typically done in a re-exam report, but we wanted to make sure that because you've had multiple re-exams since doing a full master plan, we wanted to get a little bit more from the community that we would generally ask in a re-exam.
Okay, anybody have any more questions for Matt?
Okay, so what I will do next is, I'll continue working with staff to refine some of the technical errors that we found. And I'm going to, fill out the recommendation section a little more thoroughly after tonight's conversation. Once that's ready, we'll circulate that to everybody for comment. We'll have to talk about how that's compiled and brought back to me, and then we'll see what we can do about incorporating it as best as we can, presenting the final.
That's great. Yeah. Yes, well, I'll have to step down and then, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, don't get it. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to any public questions. If anybody from the public would like to address the board or address the plan, Tim. Please just state your name.
Good evening, my name is
And
Pam
address.
Baker, 207 Stevens Street. A lot of the discussion about the housing is really relevant. I appreciate all the thought that comes from the different perspectives. One of the things that I hear over and over again is the intensity. Just this morning, someone relayed to me about a larger home, maybe 4-bedroom, which I think is larger, right? Had like 16 cars there over the past weekend. With 4 bedrooms, you know, the intensity of the use, I think, is a big part of what catches people in the neighborhoods. It's the overuse, it's the over, you know, the noise from say 4-bedroom, 8 people, 10 people, it's gonna be far different than what you see from 14, 16 cars coming in with probably 2, maybe more people. And so that I think can help to quell some of the concerns that are in town if that area is looked at. With regard to the duration, that's really a hard one, because you do have to think about the long-term investments that people have made in the town, in the community. Some have been here a long time, some come in short, you know, now they're gonna stay here too, but they've made financial decisions based on what the zoning was. And just to relay, a few years back, I was in a conference with a couple land use attorneys, local land use attorneys, and this topic came up then. And the point made was, it's really hard to reel back when you've been in an economy where rentals, whether they're, you know, the old time mom and pop got in the car and went down on the shore for the week, you know, it's part of the fabric of who we are. So as much as we want to see more year round and less intense use, we also have to somehow find a way to temper that with, you know, people's rights, because I guarantee that's going to be the first thing that you all hear, or the governing body hears, if these changes are proposed to a great deal of restriction on what they're allowed to do. Some thoughts.
Thank you. Else like to come up? Please just state your name and your address, sir.
Yeah. Hi, Bill Ettinger, 315 Third Avenue. On the controlled rent terms, just for what it's worth, property across the street from us is family owned. I don't have to own it, but it's family owned. We also get requests for weddings, wedding groups, and reunion groups, not high school reunion, like a bunch of people getting together. So that's, and we hear more of that than we do some of the other things that were mentioned, for what it's worth. It seems to me if you control the size of the house, you control the size of how many people, the number of how many people are going to be in there to rent, if you can set a standard. So does the fire department set that standard? They do in commercial buildings, right? Occupancy by no more than this many people is prohibited. Can they or do they do that on residential? When we first bought our house, the fire department came in. check the house out, say, here, you need this, can they also, I don't know if they can do this, it's just a thought. Can they also say, okay, there shouldn't be more, there's 5 bedrooms here, there shouldn't be more than 10 people in here? Or I guess that'll tie into a mercantile license.
Exactly, but we learned it lower, actually. That's last time, it's lower.
Who sets it?
Those adjustments.
I base this on,
For the number of people you
go is it per bedroom, or is it per square foot?
no, per unit, so you get my property, I have, I pull a mercantile license for sleep 6. Next category was sleep 10, and then there were categories, and another category above that. And then they're, I think they're still evolving their rules and inspections to follow. But yeah, they have their fire inspection.
So you apply for one of them, they go inspect it and say, yes, we can have 6, or you can do 8, yes, I can do that, 8, or they say, no, you only can have 6. Is that how it works?
Not on an annual basis.
I don't, I don't know if I don't.
I didn't know.
They don't, they look for violations. There's not they're not connecting the dots where you see 6 and like, well, there's only 1 bedroom and you sleeping 6 people in here, you know? That's not happening. It's just they're looking for fire safety violations. So that's where I guess the mercantile license could.
yes, I base this on virtually nothing, but I do recall being added where this came up. Sometimes I say things you can think.
He says with the search.
You can't think, like, I tell you, you can't take this to the back. But I believe it was either here or at KMA, probably at KMA or someone, remember it. That someone who knew something about this said that residential, there's no occupancy limits on residential uses by the fire code. That's not what it does. On commercial, there is. So that if you want to limit occupancy, you have to do it through a mercantile license, so that's a commercial use, and then you can limit occupancy. Someone who seemed to know a lot about it said that. And I have to say that sounds right to me. So I remember going and trying to look into it, and I couldn't find the occupancy limit on a residential home, which in my house, I don't think anyone would come to me like and have stay there. Like I don't know how that would possibly work, and I've had a lot of people stay there. There is something out there in some other kind of regulation. I don't know if it's like DCP&P or something like that, like regulation, because where you have to have a certain number of bedrooms, there's some number of children in a house. There's something to that, but that's different. So
I did like what you said, once you sign a mercantile license and pay for it, you're now a commercial.
there are ones in this packet you're going to see that say you can have 2 renters or 2 renters per bedroom or something like that.
One question and then. The draft you were referring to, Nick?
I think.
Not yet. So it'll be available to the public when it's final? Probably for final proposal. Somewhere between final draft and approval. That makes sense.
It should be.
That's what you noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I think I may be preaching to the choir here, so I'll try to keep the sermon short. I want to address the 10-year plan as it relates to development. Obviously, I'm not the only one concerned with this. The amount of development, the density of development, the nature of the development. We don't have to look any further than up the coast to see how development adversely affects the town, period. Whether you're living there full-time, you're living there part-time, or you're renting, it adversely affects the town. We have friends who live in Ocean City come summer. I wouldn't say they don't go out, but you know, they're pretty circumspect about where they go and what they do because they have to be. If we look back 10 years, we can see how things can change. Right? I've lived here, well, I bought here 20 ago. Things have changed. I recognize things were going to change. I mean, I was in the mortgage business. I know that people buy houses. But we now, it seems to me that, and I think to a lot of other people based on the review or based on the questionnaire, that now's the time that we have to look at the character of the town and how development is affecting the character of the town. We face significant challenges to our